So here's a question for the ages. What exactly do you get for your money when buying a high-end speaker? And could the Wharfedale Elysian 4 still be considered a bargain despite its asking price? Well, let's find out. Before we jump into the video, I would like to thank today's sponsor, KRISTI'S. 2 out of 3 men will experience some form of hair loss before they're 35. That means that roughly 60% of you, yes, you watching this right now, are or have experienced some form of hair loss. Now, I'm not judging because I didn't even make it to 35 before Father Time decided to bless me with thinning hair. I started losing mine in my late 20s. But we can do something about it with KRISTI'S. I got the care I needed for my thinning hair without having to leave my home, visit a doctor, or even go to a pharmacy thanks to KRISTI'S and their subscription-based service. After more than a year, I think the results more than speak for themselves. I'm so grateful I found a plan that worked for me to reverse my thinning hair and even stimulate new hair growth, and I believe it can work for you too. Hair loss stops with KRISTI'S. Try it for yourself. To get 50% off your first order, go to KRISTI'S.com/Andrew Robinson or just click the link in the description. That's KRISTI'S.com/Andrew Robinson. Thank you again to KRISTI'S for sponsoring this video, and now back to it. The Elysian 4 is Wharfedale's flagship 3-way tower speaker that features a 3.5-inch AMT or air motion tweeter coupled with a 6-inch mid-range driver and 2 8.5-inch bass woofers. The speaker's 4 drivers, along with its downward firing port, give it a reported frequency response of 30 Hz to 22 kHz. Sensitivity is rated at 92 dB, though impedance is stated to be 4 ohms, meaning that while not difficult to drive, the Elysians will require that you pair them with an amplifier capable of driving a 4-ohm load, but more on that in a moment. Now, the 4's curved sidewalls and relatively narrow front fascia help to create a more streamlined look for this rather large speaker. Build quality, it's off the charts. It's inert, and the presence of bracing and dampening materials inside is readily apparent by simply just knocking against the sidewalls. Keeping with build quality, I think the Elysian 4 deserves to be mentioned alongside the likes of Wilson, Sonus, Faber, Bowers & Wilkins, and others. I would have liked to see some stronger finish options, though. The piano gloss look is a bit played out for me. We've seen Wharfedale pull off other finishes, especially matte or satin ones, as evident in their Evo line, so the call to go all Vegas-y here is kind of a head scratcher for me. Jumping into equipment pairing, like I said, the Elysian 4 isn't that difficult to drive. I mean, we power them to near perfection with an AV receiver, the Marantz SR8015 we just reviewed. So don't think that you need to go out and spend equal amounts of money on an amp or integrated in order to experience the Wharfedale at their best. Just make sure your amp is capable of driving a 4-ohm speaker and possesses at least 50 to 75 watts per channel. At least that's what I have found to work best. We used a variety of amplifiers, ranging from the Audiolab 6000A Play to the insanely powerful Hi-Fi Rose RA180 and just about everything in between. Standout pairings included the Hi-Fi Rose as well as the Rotel 1592 Mark II, with the Rotel being my overall favorite thanks to its Class AB design. Other associated equipment included the Hi-Fi Rose RS150 streamer, our Audio-Technica LP140 XP with an Ortofon 2M black cartridge, and our Apple TV 4K, and yes, we did enjoy the Elysians as part of a home theater setup for which we relied on the 8015 for power and our Klipsch in-ceiling speakers and our SVS 3000 micro subwoofer to round out the Elysian tower and center's performance. Spoiler alert, that system was epic. So just what do you get for the money when buying a high-end speaker? Well, let me just get right to it. On paper, as in measured response, you don't get demonstrably better performance. But like we always say on this channel, measurements only tell half the story, and the Elysians do a lot more than their mere specs would lead you to believe. Measured at our listening position, the Elysians prove to be very similar to another great speaker we've had in-house recently, the Polk R700. Now, the Wharfedale exhibits a small rise in the bass around 100 Hz. So if you're like me and you prefer detail, snap, and or presence in your bass over, say, outright boom, the Wharfedale, at least on paper, will give you that type of low-end presentation. The Elysian also sports a small but noticeable boost in the mid-range, though this isn't likely to offend, as it will no doubt make vocals and instruments sound just a hair warm, which should do wonders for lower quality digital recordings or just modern digital recordings in general. Lastly, the Wharfedale rolls off a bit around 2K, though once it takes some of the edge off, it remains more constant up into the limits of our hearing, resulting in highs that come across as more present and airy. But enough about specs and measurements. Much of what sets the Elysian 4 apart from the competition is 100% due to its build quality. Starting with the bass, the Elysian's bass isn't overly rich. As you near subwoofer territory, the Wharfedale is largely linear, so the speaker does not come off as boomy, but rather very articulate and detailed. There is weight, and the Elysian's bass is incredibly tactile and present, but it is void of excess bloat due to the speaker's inert cabinet. If you like a well-dampened kick drum, plucky stand-up bass, or a well-defined bass guitar riff, the Wharfedales will impress. And when it comes to instruments and vocals that exist within the mid-range, the Wharfedale is a tour de force. Despite there being a slight emphasis on slight injection of mid-range energy around the vocal range, the Wharfedale sounds as neutral as our Revel M16 in terms of tone, though it does have just a touch more weight. Now this added weight, slight as it may be, doesn't outright change the timbre of instruments or vocals, but it does help to ground them more solidly in three-dimensional space. When listening to Alanis Morissette, David Gray, or Beth Hart, the Elysian's mid-range was effortlessly clean, meaning no audible coloration on behalf of the cabinet. Vocals had more dimension and definition compared to other speakers, which includes the R700. While this greater sense of focus may not be immediately apparent, once you A/B the Wharfedale against other speakers, it becomes easier to discern and therefore harder to live without. Keep in mind, the Wharfedale's mid-range performance, like the rest of its sound, isn't lively or live. Its added mid-range presence is born out of supreme focus, and not a projection or worse, a sense of forwardness. Which brings me to the tweeter. Now, I do not pretend to know what exactly the team at Wharfedale does to make their AMT drivers so, well, not AMT-like. But like with the Evo 4.1, the Elysian's use of air motion drivers is terrific. I typically find that AMT drivers are a bit clinical, and while I wouldn't classify the Elysian's tweeter as sweet, it isn't soulless or dry either. It is extended, meaning that you will likely hear a greater sense of detail compared to others, though the Wharfedale never comes across as fatiguing or shrill. Even poor recordings, for example Miley Cyrus's last two albums, or the somewhat Jekyll and Hyde mix of Church's latest Screen Violence, never sounded bad, which is more than I can say for some speakers. The Wharfedale didn't gloss over any of these albums' shortcomings, but it also didn't make them worse. I don't know how else to say it, but when it comes to AMT drivers, Wharfedale may be the only brand that I trust with their use. Which brings me to arguably the two biggest ways the Elysian 4 separates itself from lesser competition and even some high-end ones: soundstage and dynamics. This speaker is so well sorted and controlled top to bottom, the definition and delineation within the soundstage is almost second to none. When people speak of pinpoint accuracy and separation within the soundstage, they might as well be describing the Elysian. In terms of focus, I have heard equal, but maybe not better. As it relates to dispersion in space, the Wharfedale is utterly fantastic. Sound unfolds with ease, with boundary-defying spaciousness that is equal in its scale both laterally and vertically. To say the Elysians are capable of a transformative presentation, placing you square in the middle of a recorded event, would be an understatement. And as for dynamics, as you might expect, they're excellent. Again, because of the Wharfedale's construction, none of the speaker's dynamic expression is lost or swallowed up by its cabinet. So in terms of reflexes, the Wharfedale is surprisingly nimble for such a large speaker. Do you like big orchestral swings or maybe blistering special effects sequences like those in Ghostbusters Afterlife? The Elysian, it's up to the task. And speaking of movies, if you have the space, who are we kidding, everything in this line is huge, and the financial means, this may be one of, if not the best home theater trio I've heard. It definitely hangs with my old Bowers & Wilkins 802D and Revel Studio 2 home theaters, only the Elysian 4 and matching center will run you far less. Seriously, I loved movies so much through these speakers. But bringing things back to my initial question, and that is, what do you get when spending more for something like the Elysian 4 over, say, an almost equally equipped tower in the cheaper Polk R700? You get better build quality and a more inert cabinet, likely better crossover materials, which results in performance that may not measure better or worse, but that sounds different. That said, is it a night and day difference? No. If the Elysian represents a perfect 10 for a high-end speaker, then I have to say the R700 is a solid 9. So the question really becomes, how much are you willing to spend to achieve those last few percentage points of arguable perfection? I can't answer that for you, but if you want to know which is the better speaker, make no mistake, it is the Elysian. Which is the better value? Well, that's where things get interesting. When only looking at the Polk R700 and the Elysian 4, which I don't believe will be cross-shopped that often, the Polk is unquestionably the better value. But when comparing the Elysian against the likes of the Revel Salon 2, Bowers & Wilkins 800 series, and even high-end darlings like Wilson Audio, the Wharfedale is a bona fide high-end steal. Having owned both the $17,000 a pair Revel Studio 2s and the $26,000 Bowers & Wilkins 802 D2 towers, I can say without any hesitation that the Wharfedale is every bit those two speakers equal. While my subjective taste may still prefer the look of my old 802Ds and their walnut and leather finish, sound-wise, I wouldn't think twice about choosing the Wharfedales over either the Revel or B&W. If the performance is equal or on par with costlier speakers such as these, why not save and go with the Elysian? I know I would. I have to say, and this comment is no doubt colored by some of my own personal experiences and biases, but I'm about over some of the BS that surrounds a lot of high-end products, especially loudspeakers. I get it. The Elysian 4 is an expensive speaker. I get that it's not going to be for everyone as a result, but if you are on the market for a truly cost-no-object speaker capable of the type of performance a lot of audiophiles will try and convince you that you can only achieve by spending upwards of 6 figures, run. Don't walk, run away from these people, because the Elysian 4, while expensive, will give you the exact same performance of many of these touted speakers for a lot less. If you're looking for an endgame speaker, one that you can take comfort in knowing you're hearing arguable perfection each and every time you hit play, you owe it to yourself to hear the Elysian 4. So that's it. That is now my review of the Wharfedale Elysian 4 towers, but now I'm curious what Kristi thought of them.
Well, okay, before I get into my personal opinions, I don't think I can let what you just said go by without maybe asking you a little bit more about it. Like the comment you made about your being over some of the BS that surrounds a lot of high-end products, like especially speakers. I really think you have to give a little bit more information about what you mean.
Okay.
I mean, I think I have I think I know what you're talking about, but I wouldn't want to leave it up to interpretation.
Okay. All right. Fair question. What I mean by I'm over a lot of the BS is in my travels, which go back a long time now, it seems like as a speaker or any high-end component, as it gets more expensive, somehow all of the asterisks or caveats also seem to grow around it. There are so many times in my review history where I've come across speakers or have been asked to review speakers that cost tens of thousands of dollars. And upon saying yes and sitting down to do the review, it's always been prompted by, oh, make sure you do this, make sure you do that, make sure you have this type of amplifier, make sure you do this specifically, or, make sure you let it break in for 4,000 hours. And the funny thing is that while not every speaker is exactly the same, obviously, and there are different types of technology, at their core, speakers are speakers. And a speaker doesn't know if it's high-end or entry-level. So it's really funny to me, and I call BS on certain manufacturers that put so many stipulations on their product's performance as it gets more expensive, because no one, and I mean this, literally no one has ever handed me a $500 or $1,000 pair of speakers and said, oh, you're not going to hear what these speakers really sound like unless you do X, Y, and Z. They just give them to you, or they send them to you, or you buy them and you get the performance you're paying for. Whereas with high end, it's like, hey, if you can only listen to these under a full moon for 14 minutes a day, on the vernal equinox, whatever, and that's when they're going to sound their best. But every other time it's going to be, it's probably you,
Yeah. Or your equipment.
Or your equipment.
Or your room.
And I don't get that, and I don't like that. And I was really very pleased that while expensive, the Elysian 4s performed how I have experienced all other Wharfedale speakers to perform. And that is, you get them, you set them up in your room, you plug them into your electronics, and they just sound good. Now, do the Elysian 4s get better as you update your ancillary equipment? Sure. But again, that's like walking it in 1 percentage point at a time, because if you have a solid baseline of, say an integrated amp like the Rotel, which is not cheap, but it's, $3,000. It's not $30,000. You're fine. This is a great pairing, and one that will give you 100%, in my opinion, of the Elysian 4's capability.
Yeah, okay.
So,
I mean, that makes sense. And I completely agree with you. Mm-hmm. And I totally agree that there's a lot of higher end speaker companies that, as a part of their gatekeeping process, put restriction after restriction mm-hmm. on the buyer as well as the reviewer mm-hmm. When it comes to determining whether or not that person, whether it's just a person off the street buying the product or a reviewer, is going to be, if it's going to be right for them.
Yeah.
All of that judgment, I think, is unfortunate because it limits the exposure somebody has to a particular product. Mm-hmm. But I think if you look into maybe what that is all about, mm-hmm. you can quickly start to see that they're
looking for reasons to justify their price tag. And sometimes, even the shopping experience can inject an aura of exclusivity. And sometimes exclusivity is about the only thing that you can claim when paying astronomical sums of money.
If your product's good, then let it prove itself.
Exactly.
It's why I appreciate a company like Wharfedale even more. Anyway, back to this particular speaker. Mm-hmm. I thought they sounded amazing.
Yeah.
They definitely rank among the best I've personally ever heard. And watching movies with them was the biggest eye-opener for me. I mean, what they were able to do with that Transformers movie mm-hmm. was absolutely insane.
They made a truly crap movie watchable.
Oh, for sure. For sure. That movie's still terrible. But wow, did it sound great.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
The way the sound traveled across the room, even in a simple 3-channel setup, was really impressive. Mm-hmm. The center speaker is, for sure, the best center channel I have personally ever heard. It was super clear.
Yeah.
I never once mm-hmm. questioned what it was I was hearing. Yeah. Never had to turn to Andrew and be like, what'd they say? Huh? Which, frankly, even annoys me. Yeah. I think, honestly, that the size is going to be the biggest roadblock for people. I mean, honestly, other than the price. Even an hour larger than average size room, I found them to be a little overwhelming, mm-hmm. and especially the center channel. I mean, that thing is the biggest thing I've ever seen. It's basically like, a small child.
It's actually as big as some towers.
It is huge. It is huge.
And it's 88 pounds, I believe. It's not light.
Yeah, you really have to have a special room mm-hmm. to accommodate it.
The only thing that I think is not wrong, but potentially problematic with the center is it does have a stand. Now, we were not sent the stand because we knew we were going to put it on our concrete blocks, but it does have a stand that Wharfedale will sell you, and that will place the speaker up off the floor. I think it's 17 or 18 inches. And because of the height of the speaker itself, this may cause you to have to mount your television or even a projection screen a little bit higher than what is probably recommended. Our TV is currently mounted at the appropriate height for our seated position. It's not too high, like some of you like to note in our old house. And in that case, even the Wharfedale stand would have made the center speaker higher than what you're seeing in this video. And so I think at a minimum, they should probably make a lower stand or offer it as an option. And if they have to, do what Revel did and offer a smaller, lower stand, but that has a little bit of upward tilt so that you can still get that proper angle with a seated position, but it can sit below a properly mounted television or screen.
Yeah, I completely agree because frankly, the majority of media cabinets, available today are way too tall. So, the only other thing I wanted to talk about, and this is, I guess, subjective, is about the style. I'm not a fan of the piano gloss finish, especially on something that's almost the size of, like a person. I guess it's tradition or something. I don't know. No one is ever going to convince me piano gloss is a good idea. And especially at these prices, I really want to see Wharfedale source better and more modern finishes. And it would lead me to say, yeah, this is a speaker I want to stay.
Yeah, it would be more apt to buy as well. Look, gloss finishes don't have any impact on sound performance, but I will say the decision to kind of branch the Elysian series out to encapsulate home theater and having all of the speakers in a piano gloss finish, whether it's walnut, white, or black, is very problematic in a home theater environment.
Because of the reflections.
Because of the reflections. And this is especially true of the center channel, which acted as like a mirror on its top face sitting below our television. So at a minimum, I think Wharfedale can issue a running change, maybe offer a matte finish, if only in black. I mean, they did a running change for the Lintons in bringing a black to market. I think they could do the same here, and they clearly know how to do a matte finish, or the people that help them to build their cabinets clearly know how to do a matte finish, because the Evo line is matte. That would be exceptional, and it would pay huge dividends for those of you that may want to build a cost no object home theater around speakers like this. All right, that is now our review of the Wharfedale Elysian 4-tower speaker. What did you guys think? Let us know down in the comments below. And my question of the day for you is pretty simple. Probably saw this one coming. And that is, now that we've talked about a kind of punches above its weight speaker in the R700, and now a kind of cost no object speaker in the Elysian 4, what do you think you get for your money when spending more? And to all of you, how many of you do you feel that extra expense is worth it? I'm curious. And we have purposely kind of structured these two reviews to go together because I want to have this conversation. So let's get it going. Be respectful. Be respectful. But
argue your point.
Argue your point.
Not the other person.
Not the person. And let's get the conversation going because I really think it's going to be a fun one. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead and ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you use any of the links that Kristi left for you down below, or you leave us a thanks, or you become a member, all three of these things are great ways that you have continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we do here. And both of us, thank you very much for doing that. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile. Oh, and real quick, special thanks to Keeps for sponsoring this episode. Again, to get 50% off your first order, go to keeps.com/Andrew Robinson. Thank you again to Keeps. And that is now it for us today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. Bye.